Something that changed my perspective on life and the way I thought about things and such was an emergency event I faced when I was a teenager. I still remember the sequence of events. I was a high school senior, sleeping at home, relaxing as usual. And I remember hearing this blood-curdling scream coming from one of the other rooms. I get up, run towards the source, and I see my mom struggling to keep my dad up. My dad's moving in and out of consciousness, and I know something is wrong. And right then, I froze. Mind you, by this time, I've already lost my best friend to cancer. I've already saved someone's life. So for me, life and death really wasn't a new thing. I should have been active. But the reason I froze was because somebody I loved, somebody I thought was invincible, my Superman, so to speak, found his kryptonite. And that completely devastated me. The first person I called was my aunt. The second person I called was my older sister. And she called an ambulance about 5 or 10 minutes later. I didn't even think about it. Now, my dad's doing okay. This is actually a week and a half, 2 weeks later. He can still kick my butt, as he demonstrated a few weeks earlier in an arm wrestling match. And I still remember sitting in the cardiac intensive care unit in the hospital while these ECG alarms were going off where some other patient lost his life in the neighboring room or something like that. And I was thinking to myself, this must be so terrifying for the people who are right there, the loved ones, who weren't able to get the help as fast as they could. Because the fact is, when you have a cardiac attack, you literally have 4 minutes before you start losing brain function. 15 minutes to 17 minutes and you're clinically dead. Now, right then I came up with the idea, or rather the concept of ICE. All you had was, you have a flat line, you have a cardiac arrest, we call 911, get the help to you, simple, clean, we're done. I kept it to myself for a year, shared the idea with a couple of people, and when I started sharing it with biomedical professors, physicians and so on, the idea started to get more complex. It became from a simple concept to a little more complicated. It became more robust, and I had to go back, change a couple of designs, make it simpler and so on. I shared the idea with all the people think of, the security guard and emergency call center operator. I remember him telling me about the multiple heart attacks he faced and the issues that he had, and I had to actually go back, make the user interface more simpler and so on. In fact, I'm actually wearing the prototype right now on me. I don't know if you guys can tell. It's actually monitoring my vitals. And before I came up on stage, I actually took a screenshot of what my heart rate was like. And apparently, I'm suffering from a cardiac arrest. So I clearly need to do something, but this is sending an alarm to myself right now. And that's why my pocket is vibrating, which is kind of distracting. If you see my legs shaking, that's actually my phone. I'm not actually going to focus on what our prototype can do, because anything I say right now is going to be obsolete by this weekend. I mean, there's some fantastic stuff that my team has come up with. I'm not even going to go into detail, because like I said, it's going to be obsolete. Instead, what I'm going to focus on is the repercussions of what's going to happen with our research. You could actually take our platform, make some minor tweaks, and potentially save billions of lives. So let's say you're in the middle of Africa. You are in an ICU. What usually happens is a physician or a nurse does something called triage every 15 to 20 minutes. The nurse comes in, checks your blood pressure, vitals, temperature, and so on. And as an emergency medical responder, I do this when you call 911. But the thing is, when I do it in an emergency situation, it makes sense, because it's a one-time thing. I need to know your vitals, I need to know it then, and get the information forwarded. But when you're doing it in a day-to-day scenario, it really doesn't work. It's not very efficient. The physician's wasting his time doing something that anybody pretty much could do. So that's what our system is capable of doing right now. But within the next few months, what could happen is, let's say in this scenario, you have a nurse with a tablet PC, and you have a couple of people in a ward, let's say an ICU, with our monitor set up on them. And if your kidney fails or your liver fails or you have a heart failure or anything like that, our system will actually detect that, send an alarm out to the nurse, and the nurse can tell, okay, patient 6 just had a kidney failure, let's send help out to them. That saves the whole, wasting time of physicians running around doing triage, which makes no sense to me. Now, one of the other things that I started working on was Tabio while I was a student here at IIT. Neil and I, one of my friends, we noticed that there's this communication gap that exists between instructors and students. Instructors have been teaching the same way they always have, kind of like I'm talking to you guys right now. I'm on a lectern. You guys really don't have an option of asking me questions. Now, you might argue, hey, I can raise my hand and ask a question. What are you talking about? Well, from our research, we can tell students have two big fears. One, they're scared of raising their hands because they have public speaking fears. The second one is that when they ask a question, they think the professor's going to think they're stupid, which doesn't make any sense to me, but that's literally what people think when they ask questions. And when we were doing our surveys and so on, speaking to instructors and students and so on, we did a couple hundred surveys. We found these list of features that students wanted and instructors needed, and we merged them together to make Tabio. Now, Tabio is being used in a couple of classes. It's using about 8 classes at University of Illinois, about 7 classes here at IIT, and they're all test classes. And I'm just going to focus on this one class by Professor Matt Power, who's on the lower left side right there. He's a CS professor here, and he was the first person to sign up, so I guess he's a good model for me. Instead of talking about graphics and demos and showing you boring graphs and so on, I know you guys would probably get bored. I'm going to do a simple demonstration. These 4 beach balls right here, they represent ideas. In a normal classroom environment, what happens is sharing isn't very optimized. It isn't very efficient. We know from our research when you have an idea or a question or anything like that, what happens is there are multiple people who have the same question. So if you share your idea, you're not just helping yourself, you're helping those around you too. What these, like I said, these 4 balls represent ideas. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw them to you, and I want you to just pass them around, throw them in the back, have fun with it. Right? It's going to be painfully obvious what I'm trying to demonstrate in a second. And if you guys have a heart attack or anything like that, I have a prototype. Maybe it could help you out, or I could just give you CPR. Just pass this around. Yeah, when they told me I had to do a TEDx talk, I'm like, I have to do something with beach balls. It's like a fantasy or something. If you notice right now, while these guys are playing around with the beach balls, the ideas aren't reaching all of you. That's because not all of your ideas are being shared, not all of your ideas are being addressed. And now what I want you to do is the volunteers who are on the sides, if you guys could grab a ball on the sides and just throw all the 40 or 50 balls that you have. And this is literally what's happening in a classroom right now. So volunteers, if you guys could throw the balls inside. Yeah, this is why I wanted to do this. Thank you, guys. And when you guys are done, you can keep playing with it. That's fine. You can pass it towards the sides. I'm fascinated with this stuff too. One of the things we realized when people started using Tableau technology and so on, when they started sharing ideas more efficiently, people were asking better questions. This was our hypothesis. You share your ideas, you get more perspectives, you understand things better because you're looking at things from different angles. And that's exactly what's happening with our research, and specifically in Professor Matt Bauer's class. Like I said, the average number of questions has jumped from 4 to 45 with the use of Tableau and technology, and sharing increasing and so on. And what's happened is, students are asking better questions, they're learning better, and in some cases they've been performing better in the exams because they're able to share their ideas better instead of wasting their time outside going on Wikipedia, kind of like I do sometimes when I don't understand what the hell the professor just said. The whole idea of this presentation really is to inspire you guys, to let you guys know anything's possible. But coming from a guy who really has like a personal crusade to find a solution to cardiac issues and so on because of the traumatic events I face, and I don't want anybody else to go through it, I'm going to say something pretty controversial. Passion alone is useless. Everybody keeps saying, you have to be passionate, you have to be passionate. I get it, I'm passionate, gotcha. What do I do now? Well, the thing is you need to work at it. For some reason, people just think, oh, I have an idea, I'm going to keep it in my drawer. Maybe in a couple of years, it's going to be the next Google. That's not how it works. To break it down even simpler, you really need to just get off your ass. And by that, I mean really get off your ass. And do something. And by something, I mean anything. And absolutely anything. And it could possibly mean everything to someone somewhere. That's an incredibly vague statement, but it has a very profound impact if you actually think about it. Just an idea that you thought about could, potentially save billions of lives or, be the next big thing. It is something that should convince you to share your idea. Now, you might be saying, okay, Muhammad, you convinced me. I got an idea. Now, how do I get to the next stage? How do I go from that ideation stage to the actual startup? How do I go from, this brilliant idea, making millions of dollars or whatever? How do I go to the next part? I would argue the first step you need to do is share your idea with somebody other than yourself. I know most of you in the audience here, and I see Nick Rokop down there. He's an entrepreneurship guy. There's Professor John Clark. He'd probably tell you the same thing at U of I. A bunch of people coming up with these fantastic ideas, and literally I've sat in one of these meetings, they say, oh, I have this thing that's going to revolutionize the world. What are you going to do? Oh, I can't tell you. How do you expect to get help when you're not really sharing your ideas? And that's a mistake I made, and I don't want anybody else to do that, because that's what I did with ICE. I kept it to myself because I thought I could figure it out. I had everything covered. I did it for a year. Really didn't get any kind of progress compared to what I've been able to do within the last 6 months because I've been sharing my ideas with people and so on. If I were to go even further, the 4 basic steps for a startup, and this is something that I've learned from Tableau and ICE, with the keystone being sharing. So you share your idea, get some kind of feedback, find somebody who's objective, right? Preferably not your mom. That's somebody I used, didn't really work very well. She's like, son, this is going to change lives and so on. She was, all for it. I mean, it's great when, everybody's saying you're stupid, but it helps sometimes to have some kind of objective feedback. Let's say you got that objective feedback, work on that idea, create some kind of basic prototype. Let's say you don't know how to code. Just make a basic printout, have a couple of tabs, have somebody use a pen, see what they're going to do with the website. Use that thing and start experimenting. And in Tabule, I can say, for example, when we experiment with Professor Matt Power's class, in the first class, we had these whole bunch of fantastic features, so fantastic things we could do. And we realized they were actually hindering the performance of the professor itself. There were way too many things going on. So we had to actually remove certain features. And it seems very counterintuitive, but it worked better. That's because we did experiments and we learned from them. For some reason, there's this huge fashion in the startup industry that they do experiments. They have hundreds of people doing testing groups and so on. They don't really take the data and do anything with it. That makes no sense to me as a scientist. And it shouldn't make sense to you either. You do an experiment, learn from it, share the results with your mentors, and go back to work and go with the cycle. Make a more robust solution. That's what we did with ICE. That's what we did with Tabule. And hopefully that's what's going to help you guys make a more efficient product. Now, since I keep talking about sharing, and you guys are probably bored of me hearing me talk about that, I'm going to share one TED Talk that I think is very relevant to this presentation. It's a talk by Richard St. John's. It's called The 8 Secrets of Success. He basically did a whole bunch of surveys and interviews of Bill Gates, Andy Warhol, Steve Jobs, and so on. And he found these 8 traits that they all share in common. With these 8 traits, along with the 4 steps that I mentioned, should help you get to the next step. What I want you guys to do is share your ideas. I've heard some fantastic ideas while I was out in the lobby. I'm pretty sure all of you have at least one good idea you thought about, before you had your 5 or 15 kids or whatever, that you wanted to work on. Before those bundles of choice came in and you got distracted or what have you. I want you guys to share that idea with the person on your left or your right. It doesn't, you can obviously swap your contact details or whatever. Or you can talk, if you don't have an idea, you can just talk about a problem that bugs you. Let's say you don't like the way you have to put your salary pay scales on Excel and every day and send it to human resources, or you don't like the way the train system works, or something like that. Just talk about that idea to somebody. Maybe you might just spark that someone to create the next big thing to solve that solution or to solve that problem that you had. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you guys.